Okay, thanks for joining. Okay, in that case, Kimberly, can you start? Whoever is running the YouTube can start it.
Yes, Chair, it's just loading. We are now live, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll start. Right, so welcome to this virtual meeting of the Eastern Committee. My name is Councillor Richard Cole, and I'm the chairman of this committee. I would like to start by confirming those present are members of the committee. That is the case, is that? Georgina?
Everybody is here.
Right. I'm supported this evening by a number of officers. I'll read them out. Barry Devlin, Planning Solicitor, Beth Howland-Smith, Development Manager, Marie Clark, Area Team Leader, Andy Clout, Landscape and Tree Officer, Kimberly Sohn, Democratic Services Officer, and Georgina Hall, also Democratic Services Officer, who's clerking the meeting. Can I also welcome Councillor Maxine Gale as a full-time member of this committee. I think you've been on before, but now you're now full-time. And I will send thanks to Richard Seaborn, who stood down for his services to this committee, which have been very welcome. So as normal members and officers, please use the hand raise function within Zoom to indicate you wish to speak, and mute your microphones when you are not speaking. And please keep your statements brief and to the point. And the normal time is, as always, is 4 minutes. So if any member of the committee member of the meeting lose their connection temporarily, we will pause to allow them to rejoin the meeting. And if the webcast stream fails, we'll adjourn while that has been re-established. So move on to item 1. Georgina, have there been any apologies received or substitutions?
There have been no apologies received and no substitutions.
Thank you. Can I ask committee to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of November 2020, which have been published on the council's website? Could you please unmute your microphones and indicate agreement?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Item 3, Georgina, have there been any declarations of interest received?
There have been no declarations received.
Are there any other declarations of interest any member wishes to make now? Right. Have there been any questions by members of the public?
None by members of the public.
Any questions by members?
We've got Councillor Baker here.
Okay. So in terms of Councillor Baker, I'm going to. What's the right thing to do? To her to speak now, or can she speak when we get to the start of item 8?
She can speak at the start of item.
She will speak after the officer has done his presentation, Chair.
Yep. Thank you very much. Beth, are there any updates to government guidance or legislation since the last meeting that we should be aware of?
Thank you, Chairman. Nothing relevant to the matters before members this evening.
Okay, moving on to applications. Oh, indeed, the first thing is I'll just note that as normal, we'll use the polling feature within Zoom unless a recorded vote has been called. Beth, are there any applications that have been decided under delegated powers since the last meeting?
Thank you, Chairman. Since the last meeting, there has been one application determined under the temporary arrangements, WA 2020-1566 at 10 Foxdean in Godalming, and that was for alterations to existing detached garage to form habitable accommodation. That application was given full permission on the 23rd of November. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move on to item 8, confirmation of tree preservation order, Woodland at Hopkins Reeds Hatch Lane, Wormley. So the purpose is to consider the objection to making a tree preservation order, number 10/2020, and to determine whether the order should be confirmed with or without modification. So Andy, are you going to speak to the report which is in the papers?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Can everybody hear me okay? Good evening, everybody.
Yes.
You're clear.
Thank you. The presentation is brought before members in respect The report to decide whether a tree preservation order number 10 of 2020 should be confirmed with or without modification following an objection being made by an interested party. Next slide, please. The Order 1020 was served on the 19th of June this year, encompassing an area of woodland known as Hopkins Reeds, accessed via Hatch Lane in Sand Hills, Wormley. It affords protection to a section of designated ancient woodland of approximately 4.5 hectares in size, located between Hatch Lane, Wormley, and the railway line to the east. You will see from the location plan that Hatch Lane provides vehicular access from the crossroads in the Sand Hills Conservation Area to the land holdings south of the hamlet, up to the woodland access point, where it continues further south as bridleway access only. Next slide, please. This order was served following officer observations made from site visits undertaken in respect of planning enforcement investigations and subsequent consideration of a planning application for retrospective, for retrospective provision of a private access way for forestry purpose within the northern section of the woodland. Prior to making of the TPO, the Forestry Commission's officers also undertook site visits to investigate whether unlawful felling had been undertaken on the site and whether the access track was appropriate for forestry purpose. Whilst no unlawful practices in the respect of the Forestry Act were found to have occurred, the ongoing piecemeal denudation of the ancient woodland trees, understory and soil from activity on the site was of concern. The Forestry Commission did not support the provision of the access track for forestry purpose, and the Council subsequently refused permission for the development. The Forestry Commission supported the making of the TPO to control potential further denudation of the woodland resource, which can and has occurred as a result of the felling and grubbing out of trees with a timber volume up to but not exceeding 5 cubic meters of timber per calendar quarter. The order has been made in accordance with local plan policy in recognition of the woodland's ancient woodland designation, its connectivity to other ancient woodland, rarity, habitat and nature conservation value, cultural value and contribution to the wooded character of this part of the area of outstanding natural beauty landscape. An objection to the TPO was received from an agent acting on behalf of the owner of the woodland. There are numerous points of objection which are contained within the correspondence within the appendices of the report and summarised in bullet point form within the report. I'm happy to answer any queries that members have on these points at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. The woodland was subject of 2 applications for certificates of lawfulness that were determined prior to this meeting. One was refused and one was granted. The granted certificate of lawfulness, as per the map, is shown for the use of a trackway and associated area of hard standing. The extent of hard standing subject of the certificate is a consideration in the confirmation of the TPO. Next slide, please. As you will see from the extent of green hatching on the plan, the relatively small area of woodland subject to the TPO is part of the wider contiguous belt of woodland that exists south of the settlements. This designated ancient woodland has been in existence for at least 400 years and is recognised as an irreplaceable habitat and national landscape resource that should be protected as possible from planned development that may have harmful impacts. Next slide, please. In conclusion, it is the officer's view that the objections raised against the making of the TPO does not override the public amenity value presented by the woodland or the expediency in affording it protection from further denudation. It is considered to be both a reasonable and proportionate response to activity within the woodland to conserve the landscape resource more effectively moving forwards. The confirmation of the TPO is considered an expedient approach to ensure that woodland is not felled or subject of significant pruning works in the future without appropriate justification and control, either by agreement with the Forestry Commission or via formal consent from the local planning authority for piecemeal tree works. The making of the TPO doesn't impact upon the rights of the objector. However, the interference is in accordance with the law and justified in the public interest to protect the woodland and trees within it, which have an impact on the amenity of the area. Therefore, it is the officer's revised recommendation to this committee that the Tree Preservation Order 1020 in respect of woodland at Hopkins Reeds, Hatch Lane, Wormley, be confirmed with modification only to remove the area of hard standing subject of the granted certificate of lawfulness, reference WA 2020-1242. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Andy. Okay, so we have one speaker, Councillor Baker, who registered to speak on this item. Of course, it's not a planning application. So,
Yes.
Councillor Baker, you got your 4 minutes, please. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank you for letting me speak. I am, as I think you know, a member for Milford, but I will explain my interest in a moment. I'd also like to thank Andy Clout for doing a very good job on this particular problem, which I take very seriously indeed, because I lived a few hundred yards up Brook Road from the junction with Hatch Lane. So I know this site very well. And as soon as I discovered that there was an application in for certificate of lawfulness, I made it my business to visit the site again, although I don't live quite that close anymore. I was pretty appalled at what was proposed. So I'm speaking for myself here. As a long-standing resident of the area, I lived that close for 23 years. Having said that, looking at the papers, which are really set out beautifully clearly, all the factors involved, I would just like to say that personally, I would like to see TPOs put on that whole belt of woodland, ancient woodland, that stretches, I think, to the south of the Greensand Ridge, but that's for later consideration. So I am pleased to see the proposal that there should be a TPO on the whole of this site as outlined in the plans. My view is that the ownership of land implies a responsibility for the land, and that I really don't think that a sense of responsibility for the very special nature of this woodland has actually been demonstrated by the owner. I think that there is a long-standing disregard for the fact that it is Ancient Woodland 1, and that I think that this leads me to believe that he is unlikely to actually start respecting the nature of the land. And what particularly concerns me is that he hasn't been able to reach agreement with the Forestry Commission on the management of the land, and he has destroyed it's the understory and the seed bed, and as well as the trees that are so important from the ecological point of view. So I would like him to take on the responsibility for looking after the land for future generations. I think I'm afraid, I regard him as demonstrating a lack of that responsibility, and I don't feel that he can be trusted. So I would like to urge you all to vote for this tree preservation to be confirmed without modifications. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. So we'll move on to comments from the rest of the committee. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. I was wanting to respond to Officer Andy Clout when he welcomed questions. So what I want to do, if it's permissible, is to ask Andy some questions and then perhaps later speak again. Is that permissible, please?
I would try and do it all in one go, Councillor Reid. as far as you can. Ask the questions and then come back with your comments to the questions.
Right, thank you very much. To Officer Clout, are these trees deciduous or coniferous?
I suggest you ask the question if you can run them together, and then like Andy to answer in one go.
Could Andy please describe the nature of the trees? I know there's some ash, but I don't know about anything else from the papers. Thank you. And I also want to say that I agree with Councillor Baker that these are very, very important trees. I am the Waverley Borough Council representative on the board of the ANOB, and I have in my hands here the latest management plan. Now, there are recommendations in here, and I want to read the relevant parts for trees. The management plan policies seek to raise awareness and understanding amongst the public and small woodland owners of the value of woodlands and the need for management. And under policies, the wider importance of trees and woodlands and the need for their management, including disease control and biosecurity, will be promoted through the provision of advice, information on grant schemes and public awareness campaigns. 2 or 3 other points I want to make is that these woodlands are very, very important as they link biodiversity, habitats for creatures, and if these ancient woodlands, and I presume they are, full of oak trees, one oak tree provides a habitat and support for over 200 species. I think then the last point I want to make is the fact that I know that the Forestry Commission provide special grants for husbandry and advice, and I think Andy could probably elaborate on that, to help manage woodlands. And I would advise that the owner, even though he's owned it for so many years, it doesn't qualify him necessarily for good management. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Andy, do you want to come back on the? I think a couple of questions now. The first one was certainly what is in this woodland, species-wise.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Specifically, it's from my observations a mixed indigenous woodland. It contains a diversity of principally broadleaf species: oak, ash, field maple, alder. There's also holly present. It is fair to say that there is quite a significant amount of ash for what is a wooded low-willed woodland, and a lot of that ash is starting to suffer from the ash dieback disease. So there will be management required in that woodland in the near future. It's regrettable that to date the owner has not come to an agreement with the Forestry Commission in respect of a woodland management plan and felling licence for the woodland. But obviously it's hoped that that will be an approach that he takes in the future.
Thank you, Andy. Councillor Reid, did you want to say anything as a result of that answer? I gave the opportunity.
I think I've rested my case there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Else.
Thank you, Chairman. This site is actually within my ward, albeit about as far as east as I can get before it becomes the Whitley ward. And I have to say that I endorse everything that Councillor Baker has said previously. I was alerted originally by residents and brought this the goings on this area to the attention of the officers and the planning enforcement officers. And as Councillor Baker says, the site is not being managed well, and our enforcement team have now put enforcement notices to restore various areas that weren't given a certificate of lawfulness and had been basically destroyed by mismanagement. Hopefully these enforcement notices will be in place by the 15th of January 2021, but our officers feel that an appeal is likely. So I would just like to say that every protection that we can give to this important ancient woodland is welcome, and I fully endorse the officers' recommendations and hope that the rest of the committee will act accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Rouse. Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, I also thank you to Andy Clout. The report is very clear, and I think the way that Councillor Baker summed it up was equally clear. I will certainly be voting to confirm this TPO. My only question is just to seek some comment on the last point that Councillor Baker made, which was in regards to striking the modifications. And I'd just like to seek advice on whether, well, why that would not be a good, well, why officers are not recommending we do that, just to understand whether we should be taking the course of action that Councillor Baker suggested or not. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Can you answer that point?
Come back on that point.
Yep.
The certificate of lawfulness is for the use of the compound as a builder's storage yard, and the access track is demonstrated on the balance of probabilities to have existed in its entirety for in excess of 10 years. And it's also considered to have been demonstrated on the balance of probabilities that these areas have been laid to hard standing for in excess of 4 years. It's therefore apparent that there are no trees present there, and there haven't been any trees present there for 4 years because of the hard standing. That hard standing is recognised as being there, is not foreseeably likely to be removed. Therefore, I don't consider that it would necessarily be appropriate to, having had that brought to our attention and recognised in the certificate of lawfulness, that it would be appropriate to include that as woodland when clearly it is hard standing and has been for some significant period of time. And hence that is why I altered the recommendation to members in terms of the confirmation.
Chair, may I ask a supplementary to that now I've had the response?
Yeah, carry on.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to that then, you expressed concerns about the sort of gradual removal of trees from the site that would in the end contribute to a noticeable diminishing of the woodland. Do you think that allowing this hard, I mean, obviously there's a legal need to recognise this hard standing, and you've made it clear from a legal perspective that that's what we probably need to do. Can you just illustrate what you feel the risk might be to the woodland and any gradual, because that sort of gradual erosion for me looks like it could stem from that hard standing and the road outwards over time. What do you feel is the risk of that happening?
I'm not sure that I'm best placed to answer that. It might be that Marie might come in on that point. Clearly, it would be speculation for us to assess what may or may not happen in the future.
That was my worry, and yeah, that's a fair
clearly the access road that was constructed in the northern section of the woodland involved removal of a significant swathe of trees and understory to achieve that. And the Forestry Commission found that had not transgressed the Forestry Act because it had been done on a piecemeal basis. Clearly, similar activity could occur on a piecemeal basis in the future. In terms of obviously additional hard standing, that really is an issue that the development control team will pick up as to whether that is development or not, and if so, whether
it will be subject to enforcement, is what you're saying very clearly. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I'll butt in and ask a question myself now. In terms of enforcement, knowing what's happening, obviously inside a wood which is not visible from the outside, I mean, is there anything that can be done apart from it being brought to your attention by members or members of the public? I mean, do you have any rights to? Does the council have any rights to inspect the wood in this situation?
Chairman, if I may, if an enforcement notice is issued in relation to the land, the legislation empowers officers to inspect the land to ensure a breach has not occurred. So we are empowered to visit the land but we wouldn't necessarily know to visit the land unless it was brought to our attention. I'm not sure if that answers your question or not.
Yes, so I think you are relying on members of the public or local councillors to notify the council and start that process.
Yes, Chairman, and we are more than happy to work with the ward councillors on this if they wish to speak to us about it.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Dinas.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And on that last point, I think someone with a good camera should be taking some photographs so we have a record of exactly what the trees are and what the area looks like. Just a couple of points, because quite a few have been covered by now. Just going back to report, thank you, Andy. I think it was very useful to have an extensive list of the reasons why the applicant wanted to object. I thought that was very useful, and the bullet points covered that, as well as the email trail, which allows us to give it a very good balanced view. So thank you for that. To me, there are two parts of the report which I think are really, really relevant. And the first one is page 9, the final paragraph of the officer's response, which basically says there's no other legal tool that will give the level of control which is required. I think that's very, very relevant. And then point 4.5, your conclusion, where you balance the it's not substantiated and do not override the public amenity value. And to me, a very, very good detailed report, but they're the two issues that are very relevant. And I think unless I hear different from my colleagues, I will be supporting the request without modification. So thank you, Andy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dinas. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question for Andy. Did the agent for the owner actually visit the site? Because reading through the papers, it looks as though he was going to, but hasn't quite yet, which seemed rather strange to me. And secondly, I would like to thank Andy for something that has been very easy to read, has explained almost everything I wanted to know. And I think in this case, I would follow the officer's advice and vote for his advice. Thank you, Chair.
There was a question there. Andy, can you respond to the question?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The agent acting on behalf of the owner initially responded to the making of the tree preservation order with an objection letter prior to him having visited the site. He did subsequently visit the site.
Oh, he did.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask Andy just a question. I understand obviously the road that has got the track that's been put in, has been there for, I think you said it was 10 years or something, in the workshop area. I'm just a little bit confused as to how the buffer zones work for ancient woodland and the root protection areas and things like that in the case of this of the actual area that's being, which is now, I suppose, got some kind of development on it. I just wondered if you could just explain how that works and if it comes into play at all. Thank you.
Carry on, Andy.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor, for that query. Clearly, the compound area and the access track are already in existence prior to the making of the tree preservation order. If one were looking at planned new development that the council wished to support, then clearly the consideration of buffer zones would be an important consideration of that. Unfortunately, in this instance, the woodland has historically already had engineering operations undertaken within it, which have resulted in a loss of part of that woodland, which is clear from aerial imagery of the site. And as that wasn't something that was brought to the council's attention and dealt with, it's something that is now a fait accompli that exists, and it obviously now has a certificate of lawfulness to that effect. any new development would obviously have to consider the impact on the ancient woodland, and obviously buffer zones would be a key consideration in that respect. It's in the National Planning Policy Framework is quite clear that councils should be seeking to ensure that development does not have a negative impact on or loss of ancient woodland, and obviously therefore in terms of new development that would be a key consideration.
Thank
Barry,
you.
Barry, do you want to come in?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just briefly on something that was said a while back about supervising the site. I think I could confer with planning officers and Andy. I think there is powers in terms of pre-protection in the Planning Act to seek entry, and if entry is refused, to obtain a magistrate's warrant. So if there is extreme concern, I think we could go on the land to look and see what's going on. So I'd invite my colleagues to confer with me if a problem is developing on this site, or it's felt there's a need to go onto this site to have a look.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Gale.
Yeah, can I just clarify? The recommendation is with the modifications as Andy outlined, isn't it?
Beverly, can you clarify? Sorry, Georgina, can you clarify what the final recommendation is or will be?
It is recommended that Tree Preservation Order 10/2020 be confirmed without modification.
That's the recommendation.
Sorry, Chairman, can I interject at that point? The report was written prior to the certificate of lawfulness being granted, and therefore my recommendation is revised as a result of that, as I laid out in the presentation that I made. So although the original report recommended that the TPO be confirmed without modification, I considered that on reflection, the certificate of lawfulness meant that it would be appropriate to consider modification of the tree preservation order on confirmation to remove the additional area of hard standing.
Okay, I'm afraid I'm getting confused now. So what is the change or the not change? Could you say it again, please, so we're clear? Yeah, sorry. It might perhaps be useful if we looked again at the plan of the certificate of lawfulness, and I'd be able to talk to that if that's useful. Do you? Yeah. Yes, please, because I'm a bit lost now. If we could have slide number 4, please. The certificate of lawfulness which is that's the correct slide, thank you. The certificate of lawfulness obviously includes the access track from Hatch Lane in the northwest corner of the site down to the area of the compound, which is white on the plan. But you will see from the black line around the area of the compound that it includes a larger area than the white area that was excluded from the original tree preservation order map. So my recommendation is that the TPO is confirmed to exclude the additional area around the white area within the black lines of the certificate of lawfulness and the access track leading to it. I hope that clarifies. I'm not sure. So what is then not covered by the TPO? Finally, what is the area? The additional area would be the area within the black lines of the certificate of lawfulness. Okay. Is that clear to members? I'm not sure it's clear to me yet as to what we're doing here. Can you say it again, Andy? Sorry, you're on mute, Andy. Yeah, sorry, I don't know if we could compare the actual aerial photograph that shows the extent of the tree preservation order with the certificate of lawfulness. I don't know if we can do the two slides together. Is that possible? That probably is going to be difficult, I think. We go back to slide number 2.
or no, number 3, I beg your pardon. You'll see on this slide, this is the tree preservation order map as it was made, and it includes the fact that there is an area in the south eastern corner, as you can see quite clearly, the box where the compound was excluded from the original tree preservation order for the woodland. Therefore, the woodland is the green line around the outside with the exclusion of the hole in the centre, because that is a compound. There are no trees there. The certificate of lawfulness that was granted, obviously includes a slightly larger area than that compound and the track that leads to it. That is all covered in hard standing and has been covered in hard standing apparently for in excess of at least 4 years. Therefore, my recommendation was, as there are no trees present on that is excluded in addition to the originally excluded area.
And that's your final recommendation?
Yes.
Okay. So what is the correct recommendation that we should be voting on finally?
My recommendation is that the TPO be modified. Excuse me, refer to my notes. It be confirmed with modification only to remove the area of hard standing subject of the granted certificate of lawfulness WA 2020-1242.
Okay.
I wonder if I could raise a sort of point of order and procedure, Chairman, at this point. I think we're used as members of this committee to receiving additional information and amended recommendations right up to the last minute before committee. And I really can't understand why we've had this paper for so long and it appears the position has changed and we haven't had submitted to us an amended recommendation. It's only emerged as during the course of the debate. I find that rather concerning, and I mean, perhaps you as chairman could take that offline, but I think it is of concern.
Yeah, I'm afraid it's leaving me somewhat confused as well, so as was clear from what I was saying. Okay, we'll carry on with speakers and see if we can resolve this. Councillor Darcy.
Thank you. Sorry, that was a bit. Yeah, I think it's not confusing to me. I think I fully understood what Andy's saying, which is essentially that black area is excluded from the tree preservation order. What concerns me is why that area was allowed to be done, it turned into hard standing in a track without having to apply for any sort of permission. Is that just because you don't need planning permission to do that? So you can just trash a bit of ancient woodland and stick hard standing on it and nobody can do anything about it. Is that what happens? Sorry, that's a question.
Sorry, Councillor, it may be that Beth is in a better position to comment on that than myself. My understanding is that if an area of land, whatever it may be, whether it's ancient woodland or a field or whatever, if somebody puts hard standing down on it, they don't necessarily need planning permission to do that. There are controls as to what extent can and can't be done, but I'm afraid that's not really a field that I'm familiar with.
Chairman, I'm happy to add to that if
yes, but please do, Beth. Karen.
Thank you, Councillor Darcy. That's a good question. In short, no, people can't just put hard standing down as they wish. There are some permitted development rights, as Andy suggests, but when you are in a piece of woodland that is as secluded as this one, we won't necessarily know that they've done that unless someone brings it to our attention, which in this case they have, and which is why the enforcement team are aware of it. So it's a really, really difficult one. These pieces of land are very, very valuable to us, but unless people let us know, or unless people follow the legislation and apply for permission or apply for an exemption, we're not going to know about it until it's too late. And then we have to take action retrospectively. And as we all know, once some things are done, they cannot be undone, such as this sort of work.
Okay, so what I don't really understand is why we would then grant a certificate of lawfulness when they've done something unlawful effectively, and we said, oh, that's fine, have a certificate, instead of saying, no, take it up, because in reality, you can remove it. Of course you can. It's not impossible to remove it. It's just a lot of work.
Okay,
but
so Chairman, if I may, the Town and Country Planning Act provides a provision whereby there is a time bar clause within the legislation under section 171, and if you undertake operational development, which includes engineering works, and you can demonstrate that this occurred on the balance of probability 4 years or more ago, then it is immune from any form of planning enforcement action. It's infuriating. It is caused much discussion in the planning world, but there is that mechanism there. So 4 years, we unfortunately, to the extent that they can demonstrate lawfulness, can't touch them.
Okay, that explains it. Thank you. So that means in effect that the TPO is really the only thing we can do to ensure that further damage isn't done to this woodland. That's essentially the position, isn't it?
Well, as I understand, it gives us extra powers to be able to act as necessary.
Yeah, other than, well, yeah. So in that case, then I'm totally supportive of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Cossa, your hand's still up. Do you wish to speak on a substantive way rather than
interestingly, I was going to raise pretty much the same points as Councillor Darcy, so I won't pursue those. But if I could just clarify my earlier remark, I do understand what Andy told us and as to why this area should be excluded. I was just concerned on the sort of presentational and procedural point, really, that we actually have had for a long time without any amendment a recommendation that it seems, unless I'm advised otherwise, could have been amended through the normal processes before committee, and I think that would have been more helpful to members. But I'm happy for you to take that offline, Chairman.
Yeah, the point's been noted, Councillor Cossa.
Thank you.
Chairman, if I may, on that point, obviously we don't have tree matters coming before the committee very often, and this is certainly a learning for officers, and the next time this happens we will be sure to provide members with a proper update to ensure that you're in possession of the current facts at the time of the committee meeting, and I apologise for that.
Okay, thanks, Beth.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got a couple of hands which are still up. I'll work through them. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak again?
Thank you, Chair. Is it necessary for somebody to put forward a motion that we accept the modification as suggested by Andy?
Yeah, we'll come to that point when we get to the vote. Councillor Else, your hand's up.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to come back. Just a couple of things. Councillor Darcy's question. From what I understand, that builder's yard has been there for about 20 years. So it's a case of them proving that they are established on the site. And as Beth explained, the planning laws do allow them to, if they can prove that, and then a certificate of lawfulness has to be granted to them to give them permission. And secondly, there was talk earlier about how we're going to police this. Well, my ward is huge. I think it's either the largest or one of the largest in Waverley, and I rely very much on the word of mouth from my residents. And as our enforcement officers know, my residents are very vocal. So Elstead, Thursley, Broxhead Green, through to Brook, Sandhills, they're all always very much on the ball when they feel that the planning laws are being broken or there's any enforcement needed, and they get on to myself or or Jenny Else, the other councillor for the ward, and we report it straight to enforcement. So that's how it's a grapevine system that has to work in these very rural areas. Thank you.
Okay, I think we can move to a vote fairly quickly. Councillor Follows, do you want to make another brief
very, very, very quick question, and I don't know whether it has any impact on the certificate of lawfulness whatsoever. But when you say this is a track, can you just sort of get, because I obviously don't know this area, this particular part of Waverley well enough to comment. But when you say this is a track, is this sort of a small road? Is it a dirt track that's barely a track? Is it paved? Can you just give us an idea of what we're talking about here?
Yeah, it's a crushed stone, black stone track, perfectly suitable, adequate for quite large vehicles and machinery to pass up and down it during any part of the year. So it's effectively type 1 MOT, I would imagine, crushed down to form quite a substantial trackway to the yard itself, which is obviously of similar engineering.
Thank you.
Okay, and there's no other speakers. So I think Councillor Wilson's correct. I do require a proposal to modify the recommendation to read differently to what's in the paper. So can someone please propose that? Councillor Else.
I propose that, sir.
Chairman, before you do, can I point out that I spoke on the basis of the first recommendation?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So can someone please propose an alternate recommendation?
I'm happy to propose the amendment, Chairman.
Hang on. Councillor Else, we'll just, thank you, Councillor, but Councillor Else started off. So can you say again, Councillor Else, what you're proposing?
Sorry, Chairman, happy to propose the amendment, the modification as explained by Officer Andy Clout earlier on in his presentation. And
give a second to that, please.
I'll second that.
And just so we're absolutely clear, can someone please?
Sorry, Chair, can I just interject there slightly? I'm a little bit, I'm not saying that I don't agree, but I'm a bit concerned that we have got no detail of the size of this area. We've got a little map with a little black line written on it. We haven't really got, we don't know the measurements, we don't know the size, and we're not really sure. I mean, are we, just putting it out there as councillors, are we happy with that amount of detail to accept it as a modification? I'm just having a a few doubts myself, but I'm happy to obviously hear what other councillors think.
The point is, Chairman, that area outlined with the black line that Andy showed us on slide 4 or whatever it was, has been granted a certificate of lawful use to be used as a builder's yard and access to the builder's yard. So we can't put a TPO on a piece of land that has permission to be used as a builder's yard and a track to access the builder's yard, which has no trees on it.
Okay, and the extent
I appreciate that, Councillor Earls. I was just saying it would be helpful to know the detail of that area to be able to look back at the actual certificate of lawfulness application.
Okay, but that's specified in that paperwork, isn't it? I mean, it's already been agreed. So that's specified in whatever way in that already agreed permission, I think. That's the way I'm taking it. All right, so let's try and, can one of the officers please read out the modified recommendation so we're absolutely clear what we're voting on. Someone.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to pass to Andy for this.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Chairman. It's the officer's revised recommendation to this committee that the Tree Preservation Order 10/20 in respect of woodland at Hopkins Reeds, Hatch Lane, Wormley, be confirmed with modification only to remove the area of hard standing subject of the granted certificate of lawfulness, reference WA 2020-1242.
Thank you. Right, that's the modified recommendation, which we are.
Mr. Chairman, does that include the access way, Andy? Can I ask through you, Mr. Chairman?
Please, Andy, do you want to clarify that point?
Yeah, it includes the area within the black line on the certificate of lawfulness, Barry. So that does include part of the access way.
Good, thanks. Thank you.
So that's the recommendation. I mean, I've got Councillor Reid, you're indicating, is it, are you unclear about the recommendation? Can we try and keep it to that, please?
I just wanted to answer the question that was posed by Councillor Townsend. It's about 10 acres. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. So we can move to the vote, please, Kimberly.
Can I just confirm that the text in front of us is not what we just discussed as a recommendation with an amendment? That is the original recommendation. So at the moment, I'm not voting because that's not what we just agreed. So I just want to flag that was why I'm not voting.
I think we have to create the poll before the meeting.
No, this is quite common, Councillor
Right.
Ford, that we have to go on the basis of the final agreed wording as been agreed in the,
So,
in the process.
so to confirm that we are voting for the wording that you just read out when we press 4 in this.
I can put.
No, let's stick this. The wording which is relevant is what was just being read out.
Thank
That's
you.
what you're being asked to vote for.
Just confirming. Thank you.
Okay, Chairman, we have 14 in favour, so that is passed.
None against or abstentions. Is that correct?
No, none against or abstentions, Chairman.
Right. Thank you, members. Right. So moving on then, item 9.1 of the Villages Public House, Blackheath, has been withdrawn at the request of the applicant. Item 10, there are no matters require exclusion of press and public, and there's no, as far as I'm aware, no legal advice. So thank you very much for your attention and your time, and good evening.
Thank you, Chair. See you soon,
Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good night.
Christmas, everybody.
Yes, happy Christmas, everyone.
Yes. Merry Christmas. Yes. Merry Christmas.
Kim, are you still there?
Yeah, I am.
Do you think I should have done anything differently? That was horrible.
No, you were fine.
I was a bit annoyed about that.
Yeah, if he'd have sent the alternative recommendation through, that would resolved it, because we could have changed the poll.
Yes.
And we could have, you know, the councillors would be aware of the new recommendation, and we wouldn't have had to keep going backwards and forwards. Plus, they kept saying,